My name is Michael. Michael Reynolds. I'm a regular guy from the suburbs of Chicago, 38 years old. I've got a house with a white picket fence, a 20-year mortgage, and a wife I used to think was my whole world. Her name's Emily. We've been together for 12 years, married for 10. She was always perfect, or at least I thought so. Blonde hair, amber-colored eyes, a smile that could melt ice. But now, as I sit in our bedroom holding her phone in my trembling hands, I realize everything I believed in was a lie. It started 3 months ago. I noticed Emily was acting different. She started staying late at work, even though she used to rush home to me. She's a marketing exec at a big firm downtown, and I never questioned her excuses. It's a project, Mike. A huge contract. You know how it goes, she'd say with a smile whenever I asked why she wasn't back until midnight. I believed her. I always believed her. But then the little things started adding up. Her phone got a new password. She never used to hide it from me. She started wearing new perfume, sharp and unfamiliar, like she was trying to mask someone else's scent. And one day, I caught her smiling at a text, only for her to quickly lock the screen when I walked into the room. I'm not an idiot. I knew something was off. But every time I tried to talk to her, she'd laugh it off. What, are you jealous? That's cute, Michael, she'd say, wrapping her arms around me like nothing had changed. But I felt it in her touch, in her eyes. She was pulling away, and I couldn't figure out why. 2 weeks ago, I snapped. I installed an app on her phone while she was asleep. Yeah, I know it's messed up. But when your gut screams that you're being played, you'll do anything to find the truth. The app gave me access to her texts, calls, location, everything. And what I found broke me. The first message was from an unknown number. Missed you, babe. Tonight again at Riverside? My blood turned ice. Riverside is a swanky bar downtown, the place we went on our first date. She used to say she hated it there because of the pretentious vibe. But now I knew she lied. I scrolled through the thread. Message after message. You were incredible last night. Can't wait to see you again. He won't suspect a thing. Don't worry. She called him Jay. Jay? Who the hell is Jay? I sat in our kitchen until 3 in the morning, reading every word she sent this bastard. My hand shook as I held the phone. I felt the rage pouring into me, seeping into every cell of my body. But I couldn't just storm in and confront her. No, I wanted to know everything. I wanted to see them together. I wanted to know how far she'd gone. The next day, I told her I was going on a business trip. I work as an engineer for a company that deals with industrial equipment, and she's used to me heading out of town for a few days. She didn't suspect a thing. All right, hon, call me when you get there, she said, kissing me on the cheek. Her lips felt cold, like she was doing it out of obligation. I nodded, smiled, and left the house. But I didn't go anywhere. I rented a car, parked it 2 blocks away from our place, and waited. That night, she left the house at 8. She was wearing a black dress, the one I bought her for our 8th anniversary. Her hair fell in waves. She looked like she was going on a date. And I knew it wasn't for me. I followed her, keeping my distance so she wouldn't notice. Her car pulled up to Riverside. She got out, smoothed her dress, and walked inside. I parked across the street and waited. 15 minutes later, he showed up. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in an expensive suit. Dark hair, confident stride. He looked like the kind of guy you'd see in a 10-grand watch ad. I knew it was him. Jay. He walked into the bar, and through the window, I saw Emily stand up, smile, and hug him. She hadn't hugged me like that in months. I sat in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to barge in, tear the place apart, smear his face across the wall. But I couldn't. Not yet. I had to be smarter. I had to know more. They came out 2 hours later, all over each other like horny teenagers. He had his arm around her waist, and she was laughing, throwing her head back. I couldn't hear her laugh from where I was, but I could imagine it, bright, genuine, the kind that used to be mine. They got into his car, and I followed. They pulled up to the Sheraton, one of those upscale hotels downtown. I watched them walk inside, holding hands. I knew what was coming next, and it tore me apart. I spent that night in the car, staring at the hotel windows, imagining what they were doing. Every minute felt like a knife twisting in my chest. I didn't sleep. I couldn't. My mind kept churning, picturing worse and worse scenarios. But with the pain came clarity. I wasn't going to be the victim. I wasn't going to let her destroy me. She wanted to play? Fine. I'd play. But on my terms. The next day, I came home earlier than she expected. She was in the shower when I walked in. Her phone was on the nightstand. I quickly checked the new messages. You were incredible. Same time tomorrow. Jay had written. She replied, yeah, but we need to be more careful. Michael's getting suspicious. I smiled. She had no idea how much I already knew. That night, I lay in bed next to her, pretending everything was fine. She hugged me, but her arms felt cold. How was your trip? She asked, staring at the wall. Boring, I said, looking into her eyes. She smiled, but I could see the fear in her. She knew I sensed something. And this was just the beginning. I woke up the next morning with Emily's arm draped over me, her breath warm against my neck. For a split second, I forgot everything, the texts, Riverside, Jay. For a split second, I was just a man waking up next to the woman he loved. But then it all came crashing back, like a tidal wave of broken glass. I pulled away, careful not to wake her, and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Her phone was still on the nightstand, taunting me. I didn't touch it. Not yet. I needed a plan. I spent the morning acting normal, or at least trying to. I made coffee, scrambled some eggs, even cracked a joke about the neighbor's ugly lawn gnome. Emily laughed, but it was hollow, like she was playing a part in a play she didn't care for. You're sweet, Mike, she said, sipping her coffee, but her eyes kept darting to her phone. Every buzz made her twitch, just enough for me to notice. She thought she was so slick, hiding it all from me. But I saw everything now. I saw the lies in every move she made. Around noon, she said she had to run to the office for a few hours. Weekend crunch. You know how it is, she said, grabbing her purse. I nodded, smiled, and told her to drive safe. The second her car pulled out of the driveway, I grabbed my laptop. The app I'd installed on her phone had a GPS tracker, and I watched the little dot move across the city map. She wasn't going to the office. She was heading downtown again, to a part of the city I didn't even know she frequented. I threw on a jacket, grabbed the keys to the rental car, and followed her. The dot stopped at a high-end gym, one of those places with glass walls and overpriced smoothies. I parked a block away and watched from across the street. Through the windows, I saw her walk in, dressed in tight leggings and a sports bra, her gym bag slung over her shoulder. She didn't look like she was there to work out, though. She looked like she was there to be seen. And then I saw him. Jay. He walked out of the locker room area, all sweaty and smug, a towel around his neck. He spotted her, grinned, and pulled her into a quick hug, like they were a couple who did this all the time. My stomach twisted. They didn't work out together. She sat on a bench, scrolling through her phone, while he lifted weights, glancing at her every few reps like she was his prize. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to. The way she smiled at him, the way she tilted her head, it was the same way she used to look at me, back when I thought we were happy. I sat there in the car, my hands clenched into fists, my nails digging into my palms until I felt blood. I wanted to storm in, grab her by the arm, and drag her out. I wanted to scream in her face. Why? Why am? What's wrong with me? But I didn't. I just watched. After about an hour, they left together, walking to his car, a sleek black BMW that screamed money. They didn't kiss or hold hands this time, but the way they moved together, so comfortable, so familiar, it was worse than if they had. I followed them again, this time to a cafe a few blocks away. They sat outside, laughing over iced coffees, her hand brushing his arm. I parked far enough away to stay out of sight but close enough to see every detail. She was glowing. Fucking glowing. I hadn't seen her look that happy in years. I took pictures. Dozens of them. Every smile, every touch, every glance. I don't know why, maybe I thought I'd need proof later, or maybe I just wanted to torture myself with the evidence. But each click of the camera felt like a nail in the coffin of our marriage. By the time they got up to leave, I was shaking so hard I could barely hold the phone steady. They drove off, and I didn't follow this time. I couldn't. I needed to think. Back at home, I poured myself a whiskey, something I hadn't done in years, and sat in the dark living room, staring at the photos on my phone. I zoomed in on Jay's face, trying to figure out who he was. He looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. I started digging. The app on Emily's phone had access to her contacts, her emails, her calendar. I cross-referenced the number she'd been texting with the name Jay. Nothing came up at first, but then I found an email buried in her inbox, a confirmation for a dinner reservation from months ago, made in the name James Carter. James. Jay. It had to be him. I Googled the name. It didn't take long to find him. James Carter, 35, partner at a law firm downtown. His LinkedIn profile popped up, along with a headshot that matched the guy I'd seen. Ivy League education, perfect smile, Probably a trust fund to go with his corner office. The kind of guy who always got what he wanted. And now, apparently, he wanted my wife. I kept digging. Found his Instagram, where he posted pictures of expensive vacations and gym selfies, the kind of stuff that screamed, "Look at me." There was no sign of Emily in any of the posts, but I knew better now. He was careful, but not careful enough. I found a photo from a charity gala a month ago, one Emily told me she went to for work. In the background, blurred but unmistakable, was her blonde hair, her black dress, her hand on his arm. It wasn't a coincidence. This had been going on for longer than I thought. The whiskey burned my throat as I sat there, piecing it all together. They weren't just sneaking around for quick hookups. This was more than that. They had a routine: bars, gyms, cafes, hotels. She was living a whole other life with him, one I wasn't part of. And the worst part? She didn't even seem guilty. Not in the texts, not in the photos, not in the way she acted around me. She was playing me like a fool, and I'd let her. I heard her car pull into the driveway around 6. She walked in, her gym bag still over her shoulder, her cheeks flushed like she'd actually worked out. "Hey, babe," she said, kicking off her shoes. "How was your day?" "Fine," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside me. "How was the office?" "Oh, you know. Same old chaos," she said, not even looking at me as she headed to the kitchen. She grabbed a bottle of water from the fridge, completely unaware that I knew exactly where she'd been. I watched her move, watched the way she avoided my eyes. She was good at this. Too good. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay next to her, listening to her breathe, while my mind raced. I kept thinking about Jay, about his smug face, his perfect life, his hands on my wife. I thought about confronting her, about smashing her phone against the wall and demanding answers. But that wouldn't be enough. Screaming wouldn't fix this. I needed something bigger, something that would hit her where it hurt. By morning, I had the beginnings of a plan. I wasn't stupid. I knew I couldn't compete with Jay on his level. He had money, looks, power. But I had something he didn't: time. I knew Emily better than anyone. I knew her weaknesses, her fears, and I was going to use them. First, I started small. I changed the password on our joint bank account and moved some money into a new one she didn't know about. Nothing big, just enough to make her wonder. I left little hints around the house, subtle things she'd notice if she was paying attention. A receipt from a restaurant she'd never been to with me. A late-night call from a burner phone I bought, letting it ring once before hanging up. I wanted her to feel watched, to start questioning if I knew. Then I went after Jay. Not directly, not yet. I created a fake email account and sent an anonymous tip to his firm, suggesting he was involved in some shady dealings with a client. I didn't have proof, but I didn't need it. I just needed someone to start asking questions, to make him sweat a little. I hacked into his calendar through a phishing email, easier than I expected, and found out where he'd be over the next few weeks. Meetings, dinners, trips. I'd be there too, in the shadows, watching. Emily noticed the change in me over the next few days. "You okay, Mike?" she asked one night, her voice tinged with something I couldn't quite place. Fear? Suspicion? I didn't care. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile. "Just tired." But I wasn't tired. I was awake, more awake than I'd ever been. Every move I made now had a purpose. Every word I said to her was a chess piece, setting up the board for what was coming. She thought she was playing me, but she had no idea I was already 3 moves ahead. That night, I checked her phone again. A new message from Jay. "Things are getting weird at work. Someone's digging into my stuff. We need to cool it for a bit." Emily replied, "Don't worry, baby. We'll figure it out. I'll handle Mike." Handle me? I almost laughed out loud. She had no idea what was coming. The next few days felt like walking on a tightrope. I was living 2 lives now, one as the clueless husband Emily thought I was, and the other as the man unraveling her entire world piece by piece. Every morning, I'd wake up early, make her coffee, kiss her on the forehead before she left for work. I'd smile, laugh at her bad jokes, tell her I loved her. And every word felt like swallowing glass. But I had to keep up the act. If she suspected anything, really suspected, I'd lose the upper hand. I kept tabs on her through the app on her phone. The GPS tracker painted a map of her lies: lunches at boutique bistros, late-night drives to Jay's condo in Lincoln Park, even a weekend work trip that turned out to be a getaway at a bed-and breakfast in Wisconsin. She'd come home from these trips smelling like his cologne, with excuses so flimsy I almost laughed in her face. The client meeting ran late, she'd say, or "I stayed over at Sarah's after drinks." Sarah, her best friend, who I knew for a fact was on a cruise in the Caribbean that week. Emily wasn't even trying anymore. But I didn't call her out. Not yet. Instead, I kept gathering ammo. I cloned her phone onto an old laptop I had lying around, so I could read her text in real time without touching her device. The burner phone I'd bought became my best friend. I'd call her from blocked numbers late at night, letting it ring just long enough to make her jump, then hang up. I'd drive by Jay's condo and leave cryptic notes under his windshield wipers. I see you. No context, no signature. Just enough to rattle him. And it was working. Their texts were getting shorter, more paranoid. We need to stop meeting so often, Jay wrote one night. This isn't worth the risk. Emily's reply, don't be ridiculous. Mike doesn't know a thing. Oh, I knew. I knew every damn thing. I started digging deeper into Jay. The anonymous tip I'd sent to his firm didn't seem to do much. Lawyers are good at covering their tracks. But I wasn't done with him. I found his ex-wife on social media. Her name was Lauren, a sharp-looking brunette with a bio that read survivor of a narcissist and a pinned post about reclaiming her life after a messy divorce. Bingo. I created a fake Instagram account under a woman's name, sent her a message. Hey, I think we have a mutual acquaintance, James Carter. I'm dealing with some stuff and could use advice. It was a long shot, but Lauren replied within an hour. He's a piece of work, she wrote. Manipulative, controlling, obsessed with winning at all costs. What's he doing to you? I played it vague, said I worked with him, and he was crossing lines. Lauren spilled everything, how he'd cheated on her for years, how he'd gaslit her into thinking it was her fault, how he'd drained their joint accounts during the divorce just to screw her over. Watch yourself, she warned. He doesn't stop until he gets what he wants, or until you break. I thanked her, deleted the account, and sat back, thinking. Jay wasn't just a fling for Emily. He was a predator, and she was his latest prey. That made my blood boil even more. Part of me wanted to save her, to grab her by the shoulders and scream, "What the hell are you doing?" But then I'd remember the way she laughed with him, the way she lied to my face without blinking. She wasn't a victim. She was choosing this. She was choosing him over me, over 12 years of marriage, over everything we built. And that realization turned whatever love I had left into something colder, something sharper. I decided to push harder. I started leaving bigger hints around the house, things she couldn't ignore. One morning, I accidentally left a photo of her and Jay from the cafe on my laptop screen, the lid up while I pretended to shower. I watched through a crack in the bathroom door as she froze, staring at it, her face going pale. She didn't say anything when I came out, just smiled too wide and said she was late for work. But I saw the tremor in her hands. She was rattled. Then I upped the ante with Jay. I found out through his calendar he had a big meeting with a client at a steakhouse downtown. I showed up an hour early, slipped the hostess $50 to seat me at a table with a clear view of his. When he walked in with Emily, my wife, on his arm, I nearly lost it. She was wearing a red dress I'd never seen before, her makeup flawless, her laugh echoing across the room as they sat down. They didn't see me at first, tucked away in the corner with a baseball cap pulled low. But I saw everything. The way he whispered in her ear, the way her hand rested on his thigh under the table. I ordered a drink and watched, my grip on the glass tight enough to crack it. Halfway through their meal, I sent her a text from my phone. Hey, where you at? Thinking of grabbing dinner. Her phone buzzed on the table. She glanced at it, and I swear I saw her whole body tense. She typed back quickly, still at the office. Might be a late one. I smirked, took a sip of my bourbon, and replied, cool. What's on the menu? She didn't answer for a while, but I saw her squirm in her seat, her eyes darting around like she could feel me watching. Jay leaned in, asked her something, and she shook her head, forcing a smile. I didn't stay for the whole meal. I didn't need to. I'd seen enough. On my way out, I paid the bartender to slip a note into Jay's jacket pocket when he wasn't looking. The note said, "She's not yours to keep," written in block letters with a cheap pen I'd bought at a gas station. I didn't care if it sounded unhinged. I wanted him to know someone was onto him. I wanted him to feel the walls closing in. That night, Emily came home late, past midnight. Her hair was messy, her lipstick smudged, and she smelled like wine and regret. Rough day? I asked, sitting on the couch with a book I wasn't reading. She jumped a little, like she hadn't expected me to be up. Yeah, she said, kicking off her heels. Just a lot going on. I nodded, didn't push it. But I saw the way her eyes flickered to my laptop, still open on the coffee table, the screen dark now. She didn't ask about the photo. She didn't dare. The next morning, I checked her texts while she was in the shower. Jay had messaged her at 2 a.m. Got a weird note tonight. You sure he doesn't know? Her reply, I don't think so. But he's acting strange. Maybe we should chill for a bit. Jay shot back. I'm not scared of him, Em. Let me handle it. I clenched my jaw so hard I thought my teeth might crack. Handle it? Handle me? Oh, I'd love to see him try. I decided it was time to take things to the next level. I rented a storage unit on the edge of town, paid in cash, and started stashing things there. Nothing incriminating, just tools, a change of clothes, a burner laptop. I wasn't sure what I'd need it for yet, but I wanted options. I started tailing Jay more often, learning his routines. He went to the gym every morning at 6, had lunch at the same deli every Wednesday, met clients at the same cigar lounge every Friday. He was predictable, arrogant. That made him vulnerable. Meanwhile, I kept playing with Emily's head. I'd move things around the house, her keys, her jewelry, her favorite mug, just enough to make her question herself. One night, I played a recording of footsteps from my phone while she was downstairs, loud enough to make her think someone was in the house. She came running up, pale as a ghost, asking if I'd heard anything. Just the wind, I said, my face blank. She didn't sleep that night. I could feel her tossing and turning beside me, her breath uneven. By the end of the week, she was a mess. She'd stopped wearing the new perfume, stopped dressing up as much. Her texts to Jay were desperate now. I think he knows. We need to talk. His replies were colder. Get it together, Em. You're overreacting. I could see it. She was cracking, and he didn't care. He was using her, just like Lauren had warned. And that only fueled my fire. I knew the endgame was coming. I didn't know what it would look like yet, confrontation, revenge, or something worse, but I knew I couldn't stop now. I'd crossed a line I couldn't uncross. And the worst part? I didn't want to. For the first time in months, I felt alive. The air in our house had turned toxic by the end of the week. Every conversation with Emily felt like a minefield. One wrong word, and I'd blow everything I'd been building. But I was done playing subtle. I'd spent weeks tightening the screws, watching her unravel, watching Jay squirm. Now it was time to end it. I didn't know exactly how it would go down, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't walking away as the loser. I started the day by confronting Emily directly. Not with everything, just enough to see her crack wide open. She was in the kitchen, staring into her coffee like it held the answers to her life, when I dropped the first bomb. Met a guy downtown yesterday, I said casually, leaning against the counter. Said he knew you. James Carter? Ring any bells? Her head snapped up so fast I thought her neck might break. The coffee mug slipped from her hand, shattering on the floor, brown liquid pooling at her feet. What? She stammered, her face draining of color. I mean, I might have met him at work or something. What? Her voice was shaking, her eyes darting to the door like she wanted to bolt. I stepped closer, keeping my tone even but cold. Funny thing, he seemed to know you pretty well. Mentioned some nights at Riverside, a trip to Wisconsin. Said you two were close. I let the words hang there, watching her crumble. She opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Just a choked gasp. I don't know what you're talking about, she finally managed, but her voice was a whisper. She bent down to pick up the shards of the mug, her hands trembling so badly she cut herself. A thin line of blood welled up on her finger, and I just stood there, watching. Careful, I said, my voice flat. Wouldn't want you to hurt yourself before you tell me the truth. She froze, staring up at me with wide, glassy eyes. For the first time in months, I saw real fear in her. Not suspicion, not guilt. Kongjir. I didn't push further. I didn't need to. I walked out of the kitchen, grabbed my jacket, and left the house, knowing she'd spend the day spiraling. I had one last piece to put in place before the final move. Jay. He was the key now. Emily was already breaking. She'd tell me everything if I pressed hard enough. But Jay? He needed to feel the walls close in. He needed to hurt. I learned from his calendar that he was meeting a client at that same cigar lounge he loved so much, a Friday ritual he never missed. I showed up early, dressed in a hoodie and jeans, blending into the shadows of the dimly lit street outside. I brought a small knife, one I'd bought at a pawn shop weeks ago, untraceable, and a pair of gloves. I wasn't planning to use it, not really, but I wanted options. I wanted him to know I wasn't screwing around anymore. He rolled up at 7 sharp in his shiny BMW, all swagger and arrogance, like the world belonged to him. He didn't even glance my way as he walked into the lounge, his phone pressed to his ear, laughing at something. I waited 10 minutes, then slipped inside after him. The place was packed, smoke hanging thick in the air, men in suits puffing on cigars, their voices a low rumble. Jay was in a corner booth with an older guy in a pinstripe suit, probably the client. I took a seat at the bar, kept my head down, and ordered a whiskey I didn't touch. I watched him for an hour. Watched the way he leaned back in his seat, so sure of himself, gesturing with his cigar like he was king of the damn world. I thought about Emily, about her texts, about the way she'd glowed in his presence. I thought about the life I'd thought we had, the future I'd planned for us. And I felt the rage boil over, hotter than ever. I slipped on the gloves under the bar, my fingers brushing the knife in my pocket. I wasn't sure what I'd do with it, but just feeling it there gave me a sense of control I hadn't had in months. When Jay got up to use the restroom, I followed. The hallway was narrow, dimly lit, the sound of the lounge fading behind us. He didn't hear me coming until I was right behind him, my hand slamming into his shoulder, spinning him around. His eyes widened when he saw me, recognition kicking in, even though we'd never officially met. What he started, but I didn't let him finish. I shoved him against the wall, my forearm pressed to his throat, the knife staying in my pocket for now. You know who I am? I growled, my face inches from his. He smelled like cigars and bourbon, and it made my stomach churn. He nodded, barely, his Adam's apple bobbing against my arm. Yeah, he rasped. Michael, right? Look, man, I don't know what she told you, but I pressed harder, cutting off his air. Don't lie to me. I know everything. Riverside, the Sheraton, Wisconsin. I've got pictures, texts, everything. His face went pale, but there was still that smug glint in his eyes, like he thought he could talk his way out of this. Okay, he wheezed. Let's talk about this. What do you want? Money? I can. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed in the empty hallway. You think I want your money? I want my life back, you bastard. I want my wife back. But you took that, didn't you? He didn't answer, just stared at me, his breathing shallow. I eased up on his throat just enough to let him speak. It wasn't like that, he said, his voice low, careful. She came to me, man. She said your marriage was dead. Said you didn't even notice her anymore. I didn't take her, she wanted out. His words hit me like a punch to the gut, but I didn't let it show. I leaned in closer, my voice a whisper. You don't know a damn thing about us. But you're gonna learn. I let him go, stepping back, my hands shaking with adrenaline. He coughed, rubbing his throat, his eyes darting to the door like he was calculating his escape. Stay away from her, I said, my voice steady now. Or the next time we talk, it won't be in a bathroom. I turned and walked out, leaving him there, knowing he'd spend the rest of the night looking over his shoulder. When I got home, Emily was waiting for me. She was sitting on the couch, her knees pulled up to her chest, her eyes red from crying. She didn't say anything at first, just watched me as I hung up my jacket and poured myself a glass of water. The silence was suffocating. Finally, she spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. How long have you known? I sat across from her, the coffee table between us like a battlefield. Long enough, I said. Riverside was the first clue. Then the texts. Then the pictures. Want me to keep going? She flinched, her hands twisting in her lap. Mike, I didn't mean for it to happen. It just did. He was there, and you weren't, and I cut her off, my voice sharp. Don't you dare blame me for this. You made a choice, Emily. Every time you lied to my face, every time you snuck off with him, that was a choice. Tears streamed down her face, but I didn't feel sorry for her. Not anymore. I'm sorry, she sobbed. I'm so sorry. I'll end it. I'll tell him it's over. Please, Mike, don't leave me. I stared at her, feeling nothing but cold emptiness where my love for her used to be. It's not about leaving, I said. It's about what happens next. The next few hours were a blur. She begged, cried, promised to fix everything. I listened, but I didn't respond. I didn't know what I wanted anymore. Part of me still loved her, or at least the memory of her, but part of me wanted her to hurt as much as I did. I thought about Jay, about his smug face, about his words in the bathroom. She wanted out. Maybe he was right. Maybe our marriage had been dead long before he came along. But that didn't make what they did okay. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in the dark, turning it all over in my head. By morning, I'd made a decision, not a clean one, not a noble one, but the only one that felt right. I wasn't going to kill Jay, or Emily, or myself. I wasn't going to burn the house down or run away. I was going to rebuild, but not with her. I filed for divorce the next day. I didn't tell her. I just went downtown, met with a lawyer, and started the process. I cleaned out half our joint account, packed a bag, and moved into a cheap motel on the edge of the city. I left her a note on the kitchen counter. You want it out. Now you've got it. I didn't sign it. Didn't need to. I heard from a mutual friend a month later that Jay dumped her the second things got messy. Apparently, he didn't like the heat I'd turned up on him. Turns out my little stunts had spooked him more than I thought. Emily tried calling me a few times, left voicemails saying she'd made a mistake, that she still loved me. I didn't call back. I deleted her number, deleted the pictures, deleted the app I'd used to track her. I didn't need them anymore. I don't know if I'll ever trust anyone again. I don't know if I'll ever feel whole. But I do know one thing. I'm not the man I was before all this. That Michael's gone. And whoever I am now, he's not someone you mess with.